Good morning, folks. We're just trying to get things organized on the technical side. There's no sound because we're not saying anything, so just be patient. We're just trying to get things in order and making sure that everyone is registered and on Zoom with us. So just a couple of more minutes and we'll be with you.
Good morning, Synod, and welcome again to our gathering, to the business part of our Synod. I am Mr. Chancellor. Do we have quorum?
Bishop Marion, pleased to advise that we have a quorum in both houses of Synod.
That's wonderful. Let's have morning prayer.
Alléluia, Christ est ressuscité. Le Seigneur est vraiment ressuscité. Alléluia. The Lord is risen indeed. Alléluia. Bonjour et bienvenue. Good morning and welcome, frères et sœurs. Avec nos amis de l'Église de la Nativité, nous allons prendre un temps de prière ce matin. Alors que nos frères et sœurs du monde entier sont engagés dans un mouvement de prière afin que le règne de Dieu s'établisse chez nous. Que ton règne vienne. Thy kingdom come. Nous prions pour le renouvellement de notre Église diocésaine. Nous prions pour notre évêque afin que tous ensemble, avec elle, nous continuions la mission reçue du Christ, notre Maître, pour que l'évangile du salut soit proclamé et que la paix véritable s'établisse dans les cœurs de nos frères et sœurs dans notre monde d'aujourd'hui. Prions ensemble.
Jésus sort de la tombe, il vit, il est vainqueur. Déjà la mort succombe au pouvoir du Sauveur. Triomphant de sa gloire, victoire, sépulcre destructeur. Jour grand et redoutable, où ressuscitera le juste, le coupable, où Dieu nous jugera. Vous jouirez fidèles d'une immortelle paix. Tremblez, pécheurs rebelles, pleurez sur vos forfaits. Que la douce espérance de l'éternel bonheur consacre à l'innocence et même et mon cœur. Que dans ma dernière heure, Jésus soit mon appui. Qu'en son amour je meurs pour régner avec lui.
Le psaume 8. Ô Seigneur notre Dieu, qu'il est grand ton nom par toute la terre.
Jusqu'aux cieux, ta splendeur est chantée, par la bouche des enfants, des tout-petits, remparts que tu opposes à l'adversaire, où l'ennemi se brise en sa révolte.
À voir ton ciel, ouvrage de tes doigts, la lune et les étoiles que tu fixas.
Qu'est-ce que l'homme pour que tu penses à lui, le fils d'un homme, que tu en prennes souci?
Tu l'as voulu un peu moindre qu'un Dieu, le couronnant de gloire et d'honneur. Tu l'établis sur les œuvres de tes mains, tu mets toutes choses à ses pieds.
Les troupeaux de bœufs et de brebis, et même les bêtes sauvages, les oiseaux du ciel et les poissons de la mer, tout ce qui va son chemin dans les eaux.
Ô Seigneur notre Dieu, qu'il est grand ton nom par toute la terre. Gloire au Père, au Fils et au Saint-Esprit.
Lecture de la lettre de Paul aux Colossiens, chapitre 3, les versets 15 à 17. Que règne en vos cœurs la paix du Christ, à laquelle vous avez été appelés tous en un seul corps. Vivez dans la reconnaissance. Que la parole du Christ habite parmi vous dans toute sa richesse. Instruisez-vous et avertissez-vous les uns les autres avec pleine sagesse. Chantez à Dieu dans vos cœurs votre reconnaissance par des psaumes, des hymnes et des chants inspirés par l'Esprit. Tout ce que vous pouvez dire ou faire, faites-le au nom du Seigneur Jésus, en rendant grâce par lui à Dieu le Père. Parole du Seigneur.
Prions pour notre évêque. Ô Dieu, par ta grâce, bénis notre évêque Mary, à qui tu as confié par l'onction et la consécration la mission de guider ton Église dans notre diocèse. Garde-la en santé et donne-lui le courage de veiller sur ta bergerie avec amour et passion à l'image de Jésus le bon berger. Fais que, comptant sur le soutien du clergé et tout le peuple fidèle, elle continue de prêcher ta parole dans la vérité et que tes sacrements soient administrés et reçus dans la fidélité. Par ton esprit, modèle notre vie sur l'exemple de ton Fils et accorde-nous de manifester la puissance de ton amour à tous ceux et celles avec qui nous vivons. Par Jésus le Christ, notre Seigneur. Amen.
Prions pour le renouvellement de notre diocèse. Dieu éternel et tout-puissant, tu nous appelles à former dans ce diocèse une communauté de foi. Toi, la source de toute sagesse et de tout discernement, Sois présent parmi ceux et celles qui sont réunis pour travailler au renouveau de l'Église et à sa mission. En toute chose, apprends-nous à vouloir d'abord ton honneur et ta gloire. Conduis-nous à percevoir ce qui est juste et donne-nous le courage de le rechercher et la grâce de l'accomplir. Puisse ton Esprit Saint renouveler la face de la terre en renouvelant d'abord l'image de ton Église. Par Jésus le Christ, notre Seigneur. Amen.
Prions le Seigneur. Ô Dieu, tu as appelé tes serviteurs à des entreprises dont nous ne pouvons voir la fin, par des chemins encore inexplorés, à travers des périls inconnus. Donne-nous la foi pour avancer avec courage, sans savoir où nous allons, mais seulement que ta main nous guide et que ton amour nous soutienne. Par Jésus-Christ, notre Seigneur. Amen. Et maintenant, que la paix de Dieu qui surpasse toute intelligence garde vos cœurs et vos pensées dans l'amour de Dieu et de son Fils Jésus-Christ, notre Seigneur. Et la bénédiction de Dieu Tout-Puissant, le Père, le Fils et le Saint-Esprit, descendent sur vous et y demeurent à jamais. Amen.
Alléluia, jour de bonheur, la joie dilatait mon cœur. La mort fuit, l'enfer est dompté, le Seigneur est ressuscité. Ne crains plus, timide troupeau, prends la sainte croix pour drapeau, va proclamer la vérité. Le Seigneur a ressuscité. Vieillard par les ans affaiblis, tous vos souhaits sont accomplis. Entrez dans la sainte cité, le Seigneur a ressuscité. Vous qui pliez sous les douleurs, relevez-vous, séchez vos pleurs. Il est un Dieu plein de bonté, le Seigneur a ressuscité. Tu crains de Dieu les jugements et redoute ses châtiments. Pécheur, crois dans sa charité, le Seigneur a ressuscité. Sainte Église, dans tes combats, sois constante, ne tremble pas. Devant l'univers rameuté, le Seigneur a ressuscité. Gloire à toi, Père créateur, Verbe, Esprit Saint, consolateur. Gloire à l'auguste Trinité, le Seigneur a ressuscité.
Good morning and welcome back to the business session of the 162nd Synod of the Diocese of Montreal. Bonjour et bienvenue à la séance d'affaires du 162e Synode du Diocèse de Montréal. I am still Archdeacon Robert Camara, Chair of the Synod Planning Committee, and we are thankful for you being here on a Saturday morning as we continue to discuss and make decisions about the diocese and the Church in Canada. Je suis toujours l'archidiacre Robert Camara, président du comité de planification du Synode, et nous vous sommes très reconnaissants d'être ici en ce samedi matin alors que nous continuons à discuter et à prendre des décisions concernant le diocèse et l'Église au Canada. Nous espérons que vos conversations hier avec la révérende chanoine Dr. Judy Paulson ont été une source de réflexion et ont suscité ce qui pourrait être le début d'un renouveau et une renaissance dans notre diocèse. We hope that your conversations yesterday with the Reverend Canon Dr. Judy Paulson have been cause for reflection and have sparked what may be the beginning of renewal and revival in our diocese. A few reminders about our session today. Unlike yesterday, we are meeting in webinar format, and you are only able to see the head table and any keynote speakers who will be addressing Synod. However, there are some 140 members of Synod here present, and if you wish to speak, when we have called upon you, we will open your microphone to allow you to address Synod members. To clarify, unlike yesterday, your cameras are not active, and we cannot see a visual of you, unless we welcome you on the screen as a presenter. Quelques rappels concernant notre session d'aujourd'hui. Contrairement à hier, nous nous réunissons sous forme de webinaire et vous ne pouvez voir que la table d'honneur et les orateurs principaux qui s'adressent au synode. Cependant, quelques 140 membres du synode sont présents et si vous souhaitez prendre la parole, lorsque nous vous aurons appelé, nous ouvrions votre microphone pour vous permettre de vous adresser aux membres du synode. Pour clarifier, contrairement à hier, vos caméras ne sont pas actives et nous ne pouvons pas voir un visuel de vous, à moins que nous vous accueillions sur l'écran en tant que présentateur. If you have questions to be addressed to the head table, I invite you to place them in the Q&A text box, which you can find at the bottom or top of your screen. If you wish to speak to each other, feel free to talk amongst yourselves using the chat function. Questions to the bishop or speakers, however, should be asked by using the Q&A function. Alternatively, you can raise your hand, and when recognized by the chair and asked to unmute, you can pose your question directly to Synod. If you are joining us by telephone, please remember that to unmute, you will need to press *6, and to raise your hand to either vote or ask a question, press *9. Si vous avez des questions adressées à la table d'honneur, je vous invite à les placer dans la zone de texte questions et réponses, QR, que vous trouverez en bas ou en haut de votre écran. Si vous souhaitez vous parler entre vous, n'hésitez pas à utiliser la fonction chat. Les questions à l'évêque ou aux orateurs doivent être posées en utilisant la fonction QR. Vous pouvez également utiliser la fonction lever la main et lorsque le président vous reconnaît et vous demande de lever le son, vous pouvez poser votre question directement au synode. Si vous nous rejoignez par téléphone, rappelez-vous que pour couper le son, vous devez appuyer sur étoile 6 et que pour lever la main pour voter ou poser une question, vous devez appuyer sur étoile 9. Le vote pour les représentants au Conseil diocésain et les délégués au Synode général se fera par bulletin électronique et vous recevrez d'ici peu un courriel de Simply Voting vous demandant de voter en ligne pour vos choix de représentation au Conseil diocésain et au Synode général. Je vous représenterai sous peu les candidats qui ont accepté de se présenter à l'élection afin que vous puissiez mettre un visage sur un nom. Voting for diocesan council representatives and general synod delegates will be done by electronic ballot. And in the next little while, you'll receive an email from Simply Voting asking you to vote online for your choices of representation to diocesan council and general synod. Shortly, I will introduce to you the candidates who have allowed their names to stand for election so that you might put a face to the name. N'oubliez pas que si vous avez des questions en cours de route, vous pouvez les poser utilisant la fonction QR ou en utilisant la fonction Lever la main qui se trouve en bas ou en haut de votre appareil afin d'alerter l'évêque que vous souhaitez parler et poser une question. Please remember that if you have any questions along the way, to either ask them through the Q&A function or by using the raise hand function found on the bottom or top of your device in order to alert the bishop that you wish to speak and ask a question. Have a good synod. Bon synod. Good morning, synod delegates. Just getting this ready for it. There we go. Okay, so just so that delegates are aware, we will have a members forum towards the end of synod. We ask you to sign up for members forum using the Q&A section. Just type in the Q&A section that you wish to join the members forum list, and we will keep a running list of who wants to speak. And at the appropriate time, we will call upon you to speak. Remember that at members forum, you have a maximum of 1 minute to make your statement. Anyone moving a motion, which I don't think there are actually any motions coming, but you have 10 minutes to make your motion. A seconder has 5 minutes, and every speaker has 3 minutes to speak at the microphone. The mover, when they do speak, has 5 minutes at the end, and when they do speak at the end, they close debate. So we have a number of simple elections, but before we do that, I wondered if we could just test to make sure that we can confirm that everyone knows where the raise hand option is. I wonder if you could all raise your hand by pressing the function at the bottom of your screen or at the top of your screen that says raise hand. You can do that now. We've got about 90, 91, 90, 92, 93, 94 people. So most of the 130 people here know how to raise their hand. If you could just raise your hand so I can know that you've done that, know how to do that. Again, it's at the bottom of your screen or at the top, depending on what kind of tablet or machine you're using. If you just hit the raise hand, then you will jump to the top of my list. It'll also be an easy count for us to know that we've reached a majority of the votes needed for any motion that comes forward. Thank you for doing that. I'm satisfied that you all know how to do that. That's great. Election of lay secretary to synod. We have to vote for our secretaries of synod who very thankfully take meticulous notes on these proceedings for us and keep minutes, official records of our minutes of our meeting. So there are 2 delegates currently listed for election, one for lay secretary of synod and one for clergy secretary of synod. This is done by house. So only lay people can vote for the lay secretary of synod, and only clergy can vote for the clerical secretary of synod. So we have a motion on the floor to elect Valerie Taylor as the lay secretary of synod, moved by David Aramian, seconded by Dion Lewis, both in the House of Laity. I ask only the laity, if you you could, I'm going to lower all of your hands. There we go. Only the laity, please. All those in favor, sorry, this is the job of the chair.
All
Madam
those
Chair.
in favor, please signify.
So all laity, please raise your hand if you are in favor of electing the lay secretary of Synod, Valerie Taylor.
So we have 70 lay people in the House, and we have 63 clergy, just so you know. But how many votes in favor?
So 52 in favor, 53 in favor. So we have a majority for election of Valerie Taylor. Thank you, Valerie Taylor.
So that motion is carried.
Okay, and now we move on to our clerical secretary of Synod, Sophie Roland, Reverend Sophie Roland, moved by myself, seconded by Neil Mancourt. Moved by myself, seconded by Neil Mancourt. Only clergy can vote in favor. So clergy, please raise your hand. We have a majority.
Thank you. That motion is carried. Thank you so much.
Great. So we have a number of nominations, as I mentioned earlier, for
Treasurer?
Sorry.
Motion C, we're not doing now.
For
I beg your pardon.
Introduction of nominees. So for Diocesan Council, we have clergy and lay. These next set of elections are being done by electronic ballot. So you will receive in your email from Simply Voting a ballot like last year with these names. I invite you to check your email after this is all done, after the presentations are done. So please do check your email for that ballot that will come in. I'm going to invite people, just bear with me as I look for you all. So the Diocesan Council delegates, Grace Burson, I'm going to invite you to come on screen and to turn on your mic with your camera, please. So Grace Burson, Nicholas Fort, bear with me. Nicholas Fort, Tanya Lasac, she's here, and Brian Perron. Go. I'm just going to spotlight you so that everybody can see you. But you have to be spotlighted. You can spotlight them, please. So I've already spotlighted Grace. There's Brian, Nick, and Tanya. Just give me a second. You'll be joining us on the screen. There's Tanya, and now Nick. Spotlight, there we go. So there are the candidates for Diocesan Council from the clergy side. Thank you very much for letting your name stand. Both lay and clergy can vote for Diocesan Council members, clergy and lay delegates. So you will see their names on the ballot when you receive the ballot. Can you remove them from the, just promote them back to panel, to attendees. Thank you very much. For our lay people, we have Nancy Green Gregoire from St. Thomas NDG, Danica Meredith from St. Jack's. Can you spotlight them? What's going on? George Ryder. And Susan Wynn. So if you could, I've just asked you to, there we go. So who am I missing on there?
Yeah, there's Susan, but I can't.
George Ryder's the only one I'm missing.
Yeah, je peux pas les mettre.
Spotlight?
Non? Oh, okay, now I can. It's here.
George, are you there? There you are. Okay, great.
There's Nancy, George, see them both.
And that's spotlights. There we go. So we've got Danica, Susan, George, and Nancy. Wave, everyone. Those are your candidates for Diocesan Council. Remembering that you need to elect three members of this group to Diocesan Council. Thank you very, very much.
And will we notify people when the ballots are sent out?
It'll be sent out while the keynote speaker is speaking. So I just need to finalize the details and send it out. So just watch out shortly after that. Okay. Do we mind? Can we put them back as?
Yes.
Back in their rooms.
Back to your rooms, please.
Okay, but they're still in the panelists.
Okay, so the next set of elections is for General Synod. General Synod is theoretically scheduled to meet in Calgary next year in July. There are a number of delegates who are scheduled to there are a number of delegates who are on the ballot to be elected. I will try to reach them again. Are we able to put them back into their...
Well, not all of them, because some of them are General Synod delegates. Don't put Grace or Nancy back, or Danica.
Okay, so Grace Burson. Right. So, yeah, Grace, there we go. Victor David, who is Archdeacon Victor David, who is also at a number of parishes, L'Antivité and St. Simon St. Bartholomew's and St. James Rosary, of course.
And Archdeacon of the Laurentians, St. Andrews.
Yes, a question about George Ryder. George Ryder is is from St. George's in Châteauguay. Amy Hamilton, also, she's at L'Intivité. She's here. Yeah.
Amy Hamilton's at Epiphany, which is related to Nativity.
Oops. Yes, Amy Hamilton's at Epiphany. Yes, sorry about that. José Lamoine, who is at the LRM, the Laurentian Regional Ministry. Neil Mancourt, who is the Congregational Development Officer, currently upstairs in our offices. Sophie Roland, who you just elected as our clerical secretary, who is also the priest at the parish of Vaudreuil. And Tyson Rosberg, currently our curate out in the Eastern Townships Regional Ministry. Okay, so have we spotlighted all of them?
That is a vote by order. So.
Right. So you will. These are votes by. David reminds me. These are votes by orders. so that you will only get on the ballot. You won't see, only clergy will see the names of the clergy delegates, and only lay people will see the lay delegates. Sorry, if you could take that, so I can't see the screen. There's Jose. Jose just joined us, so there we go. At Spotlight, Jose, there we go. And Tyson's on there as well. That's great. Everyone, if you can just wave at everybody, say hello. These are your delegates for
General Synod.
For General Synod, yes. So you will get your ballot shortly by email, and clergy will see these names on the ballot. So you can vote for one of these members as the clergy delegates. Thank you very much. Don't do anything. We're just going to.
There's only 6, don't we have 7?
Well, there might have, somebody may not have joined us. I apologize.
Sophie Roland hasn't joined.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're just going to put everyone back in their rooms. Okay. Meanwhile, for our lay delegates, we have also a number of delegates. Again, only the laity will receive these names on their ballots. So the first person is Randy Gates. Randy is a parishioner out at in Sutton. Remind me of the name of the church in Sutton. Grace Church in Sutton. Randy Gates and Nancy Green Gregoire, which you have seen before. Nancy is at St. Thomas NDG. Nancy, are you there? Turn on your camera. Dion Lewis, who is at All Saints by the Lake. Danica Meredith, who you've seen before as well, who's at St. Jack's. Just turn on your camera. Roger Spack, who's at St. Michael and All Angels in Pierrefonds. And who have we got? Susan Wynn, who we just saw earlier for Diocesan Council. Susan Wynn, if you can just, there you go, Susan Wynn. Spotlight, there we go. And then, oh, look at that. The other candidate for the clergy is Jesse Zink. Jesse couldn't be with us this morning because he's looking after the kids and has some commitments at home with the family. So, but Jesse is one of the clergy members that are on the ballot for General Synod. So you'll see his name as well on it. So don't know why we don't have anybody else.
Roger and Dion they're there. They're just getting moved.
Roger's just there, yeah. And Dion. I will add you. There you go, Dion. So if you could just wave everybody. Wonderful, great. So these are your delegates for General Synod, which will meet theoretically, God willing, in person in Calgary next July 2022. There is a backup plan to be online should the pandemic not allow us to do that, but we are praying that will be a possibility that our delegates will be able to meet in person as the part of the process is to interact with each other and to have conversations and build communities so that the church may continue to flourish with those relationships. So next order of business is the election of our diocesan treasurer. Be it resolved that Synod-elect Mr. Ronald O'Connell as diocesan treasurer, moved by myself and seconded by Mr. Dion Lewis. It's going to lower all the hands. Bishop, if you can call the vote.
Yes, and I'll just point out that on YouTube, it's only showing you. It's not showing everything else. Is that
I can't do anything about that at the moment.
We can't do that. All right, lowering hands.
So they've already started. Can you
All
call
in
the vote,
favor, please signify. The motion is carried. Thank you very much, and thank you to Ron O'Connell.
Great. Next item on the agenda is the approval of minutes from 2020. In the convening circular, you'll have the minutes on pages 81 through 90. So move that the minutes as printed in the convening circular on pages 81 through 90 be approved. Moved by the clerical secretary, Reverend Sophie Roland, and seconded by the lay secretary, Ms. Valerie Taylor. If you can indicate your approval of the minutes.
People on the panel don't seem to know how to raise their hands. You should be able to. I'm able to.
Yeah. We can move them back into the.
Yeah, move them back into the.
Do people not know how to? Am I assuming that if you're not voting in favor, you're voting against? If you could please raise your hand if you're in favor of accepting the Synod minutes from 2020.
It's now working. Good.
Yeah, it's good.
Are we carried?
Currently.
The motion is carried. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Somebody's hand function has stopped working. It was working before. Well,
I can't do anything about that.
you may have to restart your computer and come back in, but I don't know the other answers.
There's a few people.
Yeah.
For some reason, the function for me to lower hands has disappeared off of my thing.
Okay, well, Robert's having trouble now too.
Except for you. Has someone devoted me to someone?
There.
Can you lower all the hands? Thank you. Great. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is the appointment of committees of the House. So committees of the House, I'll just quickly read them to you. Our Marshals of Synod, unlike normal, sorry, I'm looking at my computer screen. I'm used to looking at my computer screen. Unlike normal Synods where the Marshals would be running around doing things on the floor of Synod, our Marshals are virtual and are here to make sure that everything runs smoothly. Jennifer James Phillips and Sophie Bertrand. The registration team is made up of the lay and clerical secretary, it's made up of myself, Sophie Bertrand, and Jennifer James Phillips, who welcomed you all this morning. The orientation of new delegates, which was done last week, Reverend James Pratt. Preparation of ballot is myself. Supervising a ballot is Simply Voting. The counting of ballots is being done by Simply Voting. The supervision of audio-visual is Ardith Robinson. Our press liaison, Ms. Nikki Ranjak from the Anglican Montreal. And approval of minutes is our lay secretary and clerical secretary with myself, Valerie Taylor and Sophie Roland. Those are the committees of the House. If we could just vote in favor of accepting those.
Please signify by raising your hand if you're in favor. It's passed. Thank you very much. Yes, we missed the appointment of auditors. It was.
Yes. Sorry about that. I realized that
Goes with the
I
treasurer.
skipped over to the next section. Excuse me. The appointment of auditors. Thank you for bringing that up. Motion D on page 16 of the convening circular. Be it resolved that Synod nominate the firm BDO Dunwoody LLP to serve as auditors for the 2021 fiscal year. Moved by our treasurer, Mr. Ron O'Connell, and myself, Robert Camara. Do you want to call the question?
All in favor, please signify.
We have
The motion is carried. Thank you. Okay, great. Thank you, Valerie Taylor, our lay secretary, for noticing we'd left that out. All right,
Privileges of the floor. So we have a few people who are not members of Synod who are being welcomed to speak at some point during Synod, but we require a formal motion giving them privileges of the floor. So some of our staff here: Sophie Bertrand, Nikki Aronjak, Jennifer James Phillips,
Motion is carried.
Matthews,
Thank you. Sorry.
the Reverend Canon Dr. Judy Paulson, Ardith Robinson, Stephen Tam, Edward Yankee, and the Reverend Gwenda Wells. If we have, Bishop, if you can call the question on permission to give privileges of the floor to these people.
Please signify if you wish to give permission of the floor to these people. Motion is carried. Thank you.
Great. Regrets. We have a few.
But then again, too few to mention. No.
I couldn't resist. So we've had a few regrets to Synod from the House of Clergy, the Reverend Mark Philippe Vincent, the Reverend Canon Dr. Jesse Zink, and the Reverend Lorne Eason. And from the House of Laity, Mr. Bill Garrett from St. George's Blessed du Canada, Ms. Marie Roland from l'ANTBT, and Mr. Richard Ver, Dr. Richard Ver, our diocesan archivist, and Ms. Myrtle Lloyd from St. Simon and St. Bartholomew. We received regrets, Madam Chair, from those 7 people.
Thank you very much. Archdeacon.
Presentation of motions, memorials, and petitions. Their notice of motion read the 2022 budget, which will be presented later this morning. We are just receiving the notice of motion. Be it resolved that Synod adopt the 2022 operating budget as published.
So this
that was moved by, where it is, Mr. Ronald O'Connell, our treasurer, and myself. So we're just voting on accepting that motion
to be added to the agenda.
David, do I actually vote on that or
no?
No. So I'm just giving notice. I'm giving notice that will be discussed later on the agenda. Notice motion for the budget, which is on page 16 of the convening circular. Notice of motion is also given concerning the voting procedure for this Synod. Be it resolved that Synod approves the motion as published on page 16, which I will read to you. Be it resolved that given the COVID-19 pandemic, which has resulted in the 2021 Diocesan Conference Synod convening online because of government guidelines restricting Synod's ability to convene in person in all cases in which the Synod is required to elect members of committees or delegations by ballot, elections in 2021 will be done electronically. We're going to do that. We're going to vote for that one now so that we can proceed with the election later on. So, Madam President, can you call the vote, please?
All in favor of the motion, please signify.
We have over 100, so.
Thank you. Please lower your hands. That's great. And I think the question from the lay secretary of who was the seconder of the motion for the auditors, that's David Arrhenian.
So the auditors were moved by Mr. Ronald Connell and myself, so the treasurer and the executive archdeacon moved that.
Thank you. Memorials. This is where we remember past members of Synod who have died in the last year. And we're aware that there are a few people who've been left out of the memorials in previous years. So at the risk of saying some names twice, we're still going to say them. The Venerable Gordon Guy, retired archdeacon, February 2nd. Mr. Duncan Shattuck, retired but very active layperson for many years, died March 8th. Mrs. Verna Asbill Negum, April 17th, longtime member and contributor to Synod. Maureen Jolly, who died in February 2020, lay reader. Eric Fox, October 5th, 2020, a lay reader and Synod delegate. William Harrison, Synod delegate for many years from Trinity St. Bruno, died in September 2019. Carol Johansson, former Synod delegate and also secretary at St. George's Plastic Canada for many years, died November 11th, 2018. Are there any other names to add to that? Please put them in the chat. Rest eternal grant unto them, O Lord, and let light perpetual shine on them. May the souls of the departed through the mercy of God rest in peace. Amen. The Venerable John Lee has been added to the list. We remembered him last year, actually.
We met in November, if you recall. So John died in the summer of 2020, and so we remembered him when we met in November of 2020.
And we did remember Deacon Robert Callender, but thank you so much for sending these names in. It's really hard to remember everything all the time, and particularly when we're in this strange pandemic tide.
Thank you for that, everyone. No petitions have been received. There have been no canonical changes presented to Synod. We move now to the reception of reports of Diocesan Council. So we are moving the reception of reports of Diocesan Council to be received, pages 18 to 25 of the convening circular. These are the official notes from a resume of the council minutes that met during the year between the two synods. So between pages 18 and 25 of the convening circular, yes. So just we received them. Is that right? Yeah. Do we need someone to move that, or is that just no so much? Okay. So can we?
A motion to receive the reports. Moved by
myself,
David Arabian, and actually the Diocesan Council is the two secretaries of Synod. So moved by Sophie Roland and
Valerie Taylor. All in favor, please signify by raising your hands. Motion is carried. Thank you.
Reception of reports on parochial statistics. Move that the reports on parochial statistics from pages 127 to 145 of the convening circular be received. A reminder that the parochial statistics are only as accurate as the information that we receive from the parishes in Parish OS. So part of the reason why we ask for those stats is to have an understanding of where the diocese is, both financially and in terms of numbers and various ministry scenarios. But we do ask that you give us that information. So those reports are based on the information that you have provided to us. So if there are any errors, if in reading the parochial statistics you notice an error in your parish, please send that information to Jennifer James Phillips or Sophie Bertrand, and we will endeavor to correct it, but that is based on the information that we received from the parishes on Parish OS. So moved by David Arabian, seconded by myself, that we receive the reports on parochial statistics.
Thank you, Archdeacon. All in favor? Hands are up already. Good. Quorum. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Reception of other reports. So in the convening circular, there are a number of reports that outline the various ministries of the diocese and the wonderful work that's being done in the diocese. I commend those reports to you if you have not already read them, but please do look at them in your convening circular. It's pages 25 to 80 of the convening circular. So move that the other reports from committees and ministries of the diocese found on pages 25 to 80 be received. And again, thank you to everyone who has submitted and done the hard work of preparing those reports so that Synod understand the work that's being done on their behalf in the diocese. So that was moved by myself, seconded by Mr. David Aramian.
How about everybody lower their hands first? Great. All in favor, please signify. Thank you. Now lower your hands again. That's great. Because your raise hand function doesn't work if your hand is still up. There we go. Thanks. Thank you, Archdeacon. Are we at the point where we have a 5-minute break?
We do have a 5-minute break.
Well, everyone, we have a 5-minute break and we will be back at 10:05, back online.
Yeah, the ballots will be prepared during that time.
And your ballots should be prepared during that time. Anti-Black racism report now included in the circular.
It's on the website.
It's on our website, and it's on our website on the Synod page, in the convening circular on Synod, or separate?
Separate.
So the anti-Black racism report is a separate report on our webpage in the Synod section.
So just also clarification for, there was a question about the ballots that I sent out. The ballots that were sent out by email was only a sample so that you see what it is that's being, the name of the candidates. You will see when you log on, when you get the email today, I will work on that while the Synod is on break. When you get the email from Simply Voting, you will see the view details, which has the information about the candidate in terms of which parish they're from. But that will come, that's online. Do not use the ballot that was sent to you a couple of days ago. That's just a sample for you to see. You must vote online, otherwise your ballot will not be recognized.
All right, so we'll be back at 10:06. See you soon.
Morning, Judy.
Oh,
Hey, we hear each other.
sorry, it took me a bit to figure out why I couldn't, hear anybody at all. So
I'm just glad it's all working.
well, good to be back with everybody. Hopefully people are refreshed after their short break.
Are we on now, or are we still waiting? I'm not sure if we've been reconvened yet.
We are on, yes.
Are we convened?
Yes.
Okay, great. And we can be heard. So let's get going. Nice to see you again, Judy.
Good to be here.
So we're hoping we have until 10:50 for our conversation, and we would love for this to be a conversation that includes the delegates to Synod as well. I've got the chat function open here, and so if you have any comments or questions, ideas, or anything you want to say, put it in the chat function. I can't promise that we will do justice to everything you say, but we will be watching it, and we would love it if this would be interactive. So feel free to weigh in. Judy, you gave us such a lot to think about yesterday and ponder over. And I want to sort of launch in kind of through the word change. There's a couple of words that are going around with what you had to talk to us about. One was evangelism and the other was change. Now, they're both quite linked. And you gave us a lot of statistics, which were really important yesterday, which I think people found encouraging. The response to your statistics was on the whole positive. People talked about opportunity, being hopeful, room to grow. But I think that it really calls us towards everything happening in the religious landscape in Canada and in Quebec to a change of mindset, even before we think of practices. And you went there and talked a bit about how we really can't see ourselves as dividing up the Anglican pie any longer. We can't assume that people will move into our neighborhoods and enough Anglicans will be there for us to continue the way we were. And I think that points us towards a really important shift to how we understand, how we grow, how we reach out. What do you think further?
Yeah, I mean, I think when Christendom, if you like, was in full operation, most people thought of Canada as a Christian country, with, certainly some other faith groups present, but by and large, they thought of it as a deeply Christian country. And so, I mean, when I was growing up in Ottawa in the 60s, for instance, all of my friends that I played with on the street, I knew what church they all went to, whether it was United or Roman Catholic or Anglican or Lutheran. Those were the primary mainstay groupings. And then, we knew there were also Baptists and Pentecostals. But the thing was, I knew that all my friends, their families had a church. That was the norm then. So when, we thought about building a new suburb and buying property and building a church, our natural go-to was, I wonder how many Anglicans reside in this area. Well, all of that has gone in a relatively short period of time, really. Because now we're in a situation where 80%, close to 80% of the population have no church connection. They have no, they're not lying in bed on a Sunday morning thinking, I wonder where the Anglican church is. And they're not thinking, even, I wonder where I could hear a really good sermon this morning or where the music's good. They're not thinking about these things. They have no real connection to the church. So that is a remarkable change that has happened just within my lifetime. And I think that when your environment changes that quickly, it's entirely natural for us to be trying to look back and see what we can do according to the old structures and the old ways, and how can we fix this thing? We're looking for technical fixes, is the language that Ron Heifetz would use in the practice of adaptive leadership. Technical fixes, if you think about the difference between a technical challenge and an adaptive challenge, if you think of your car needing a brake job, you start to hear that familiar sound of squeaking when you put on the brakes, and you start to get a little bit worried. And so the technical challenge here is the brakes on your car don't work. And the technical fix is, of course, what most of us do. We take the car in to get a brake job done. That's an easy thing. It involves us doing one thing, an expert involved that is the mechanic, or if you're blessed enough to have somebody in your house that knows how to do that, it's still an expert thing. But what if the problem is you just had triplets that just got their driver's license, and none of them are really driving properly? They're speeding up and slowing down. So that's a bit different. That is an adaptive challenge. That means the driving behavior of the family has to change. That's going to be a lot harder to change than taking it to the mechanic to get it fixed. You can do that for a certain amount of time. You can do that. But is it actually getting at the real adaptive problem? So that's an example that Heifetz uses in his book, Practice of Adaptive Leadership. So if we think about the adaptive challenges that the church is facing with this big shift from Christendom to something else, we're facing huge adaptive challenges. For instance, the role of clergy. Clergy were the professionals. We provided what we called services, worship services. The language is informative, no? We provided rites of passage, it was called. The sacraments, for sure, all of these things are good. But, the difficulty is, in this new environment, what we need to do is, as leaders in the church, we need to cultivate, I would say, some ancient ways again. We're in a new environment, and we need to mobilize the whole church to engage in the apostolic, I would call it, calling of the church. And, some of the other adaptive challenges I talked about yesterday, biblical illiteracy. How do we get our own people, really grounded in the Christian story? How do we move out of what Christendom cultivated, which was a privatized faith, into what we need today, which is people that are willing to not just live out their faith through deeds, but also to share with people about it. Because we're actually in an environment now where it's okay to talk about spirituality again. So, some of these adaptive challenges are going to be much tougher than just finding one technical fix to address. Yeah, so that's what I would have to say about that key difference between the adaptive challenges that we are facing in this new environment that we're in, and
I like that adaptive.
The old terrain.
Yeah. I think that's really key for us to take away, that phrase, adaptive challenges. You say it's not just a technical fix. And you said, I like that, the shift from Christendom to something else. Do we know what that something else is? Do we kind of understand the environment we're in? Chris Sparrow made a comment. He goes, back in the 60s, newspapers would even print the sermons from prominent local churches. It's amazing.
Yeah. Even sooner than, there are still local papers that have a regular column by clergy. So this is the thing. The shift from Christendom didn't happen overnight. It's still happening. And there are parts of society that are more deeply still rooted in Christendom. Certainly, if you go to the Southern Bible Belt, it's entirely normal to ask a new colleague that starts at your place of work, where do you go to church? I mean, I had a friend from Montreal that moved to Little Rock, Arkansas. She said she was astonished by this because that is not a question that would be deemed culturally acceptable back in Montreal. So I think we have to recognize that, you know, these big cultural shifts that our culture makes, they are, they happen gradually, and they also happen as a result of people coming to the realization, for instance, that Christendom wasn't so perfect. When you have people coming to church out of cultural obligation, that's not something I see anywhere in the Gospels. And then we also know that Christendom brought a lot of havoc with it. It was married to colonialization. You know, it meant that, I mean, I grew up in the church of the 60s, and I can tell you it wasn't such a great place. Our numbers were better, but does that get to define success in the church? I hope not. It's one definition. So, you know, I think we shouldn't be trying to get back to Egypt, you know, as the people in the wilderness were. The wilderness was an uncomfortable place for the Israelites. They had to rely on God. They had to follow God around. They had to watch for God, what God was doing in the smoke and in the fire. They had to live in a place of discomfort. And what did they do there? You know, many of them said, oh, you know, back in Egypt, we had melons to eat. We had all this good stuff. I mean, they were in slavery back there. We should not be trying to get back to Christendom. What we need to be thinking about is, how is God actually at work in the midst of this transition? Because, you know, even during the exile in the Old Testament, which was a cataclysmic change for the Hebrew people. You know, the Babylonian exile was catastrophic in many ways. And yet, what happened during the exile? Their worship was reformed in astonishing ways. The scriptures were recorded, were pulled together and brought together in, you know, a semblance of, you know, the Old Testament, what we would call the Old Testament canon. There were some amazing things that happened. So by no means here that I want to go back to Christendom, but we do need to adapt to this new environment that we are in. And I think we have to recognize that as human beings, that's not our greatest strength all the time. In fact, there's lots of things that we will do to avoid that kind of adaptive work. Yeah.
Well, that's really, I think, a key thing you were talking about. Just before we get there, a couple of people have said, Deborah talked about, you know, as you were saying, you know, there was a lot that was damaging about Christendom. And so at some levels, we're in a very refreshing place. You know, it's a really great place. But as you say, it's something we need to adapt to. But sometimes it's something we prefer to avoid, the work that it calls us to. And you mentioned that briefly yesterday. I wonder if you could expand on that.
Yeah. So again, you know, there's so much we could sort of delve into about this, but I'll give you some examples of, again, this is out of the practice of adaptive leadership. I'll give you some example of work avoidance tactics as they're talked about in that text. And then I'll tell you what they look like in the church. So for instance, one work avoidance tactic is to rely on a technical fix that in the past has worked. In churchland, this means you take a look at your budget and you know, you cut expenses. And this isn't just Anglicans. You know, I was talking to a Baptist pastor a number of, well, I guess, it's more like 4 or 5 years ago now. And the technical fix that her church decided was to ask her to take a 3-week unpaid leave. So I thought that was a pretty bit of fancy footwork, actually, on the behalf of a church that was not actually dealing with their fiscal problems. They were going to dump those problems on a quick fix that is, oh, if we just don't have to pay the pastor for 3 weeks or a month or whatever it was. So that's one sort of work avoidance tactic. Focus on a technical fix that has worked in the past. Another is to use sort of current expertise. So say churches are used to running a rummage sale, a Christmas bazaar, those kind of old staples of, I don't know what it's like in Diocese of Montreal, but in the Diocese of Toronto, there were a lot of churches that would use this to kind of, usually it was the women of the church, the Anglican church women, who would hold these things, and then they would donate to the budget of the church. They would top it up, if you like. Rummage sales, bake sales, and Christmas bazaars, they can be really good things. I would not want to axe those things. In some cases, they can be actually missional vehicles. But if we are relying on those to bail us out of an adaptive challenge that requires all of us to make the changes that we need to make, we're in trouble, because that current expertise is not going to help us. Of course, there's another work avoidance tactic, and that is to deny the problem. So these may be the people that say, oh, we've been here before. We've had our fiscal challenges before. And when we come out of the pandemic, everybody's coming back to church, and maybe even some of those people that were online will join us. And, this is not a real problem that we have to address. Let's just wait and see. Here's another work avoidance tactic. It's called the proxy fight/conflict. In churchland, it translates often into, we just need a better preacher. Or we need someone who visits everybody like so-and-so did 50 years ago. In other words, that's putting the solution to the problem on someone particular, instead of understanding that this is something that's going to require a cultural change in the church. Here's another work avoidance tactic: shoot the messenger. Occasionally, I don't know what your vestry meetings have been like, but very occasionally someone will stand up and say, I've been around this church a long time. How dare you tell us we need to change? Targeting a person in authority, which, by the way, can also look different, not just within the parish, but sometimes people attack the authority of wardens, of treasurers, of bishops. Scapegoating a particular person is another work avoidance tactic. So we just need to drop the youth pastor. We can't afford the youth pastor, the church secretary, the pastoral team. We can't afford that anymore. Whatever it is that is going to allow you to say, we just do this. We just got rid of this person and their expense, and we'll be okay. And then there is externalize the enemy. And to externalize the enemy usually means we're going to attack the bishop, the diocese, maybe even the national church, the primate even. I mean, if we can lay this problem on somebody else, then that also lets us off the hook. So these are all, they're all things that we recognize, work avoidance tactics that we recognize. And, you know, they're kind of funny. They're human nature for sure. But I think until we actually take a look and, you know, actually talk about them, why is it that Anglicans have such a negative view of evangelism? And by not just Anglicans. We saw from the Angus Reid poll that if everybody hates the word evangelism. Interestingly, a lot of people don't like the word theology. Why might that be? I'd like to know myself whether, you know, people have an equally negative response to the term local theology. That would be interesting to me to find out. But what is it about theology that is such a turnoff to people? What is it about that word? So, you know, I would just say that there are also sort of default stories that we adapt and live into as people who don't want to do the hard work of disciples making disciples, because that is where we need to go in our day. One default story Heifetz calls "Where's Waldo?" In the church, it translates as, well, I'm just not an evangelist. See, if you can just say, well, I don't have the gift of evangelism, then, you know, you can just be completely let off the hook, right? Completely let off the hook. Another, you know, default story that we live into is one Heifetz called "End World Hunger." In other words, the problem is just too big for your little church to grapple with. The problem we often tell ourselves is, well, it's secularism. You know, society's just changed too much. People aren't interested in religion. We just need to hunker down, circle the wagons. Now, while it's true that secularism has been a growing reality in our world, at least in the public sphere, which is interesting to me. So there's some tension between the rise of secularism, particularly as a response to pluralism in a pluralistic culture, because we're not the only faith group in Canada today. So in the public sphere, you see a rising secularism. But when you look at things like people's personal beliefs, personal behaviors, and personal attitudes, which is what the Angus Reid poll looked at, you see a different picture. Even if in the public sphere, there is a story told, I would say it is, about how secular a society we are. And I think, you know, particularly in Quebec with the rules around the display of religious symbols, that was such an interesting and I think deeply telling argument. In the public sphere, we are saying, you know, displays of any religious affiliation may not be shown. But as human beings, we're not simply public or private. We are holistic human beings. So it's ridiculous to think that a Christian is not influenced by their faith in the public sphere, and that you can simply do away with a person's religious frameworks by banning a religious symbol. The same, of course, goes for Hindu and Sikh and Buddhist and Muslim people. So, you know, I would just counter this default story of we're just too secular now. We're just too secular. Your church can be a church of disciples making disciples. I am 100% convinced of that. The data shows it. My own experience teaching students shows it. And, I think that that's something really important for us to grasp. Not so much in Anglican circles, but in other denominations, there's another default story that I think we often lean into as Christians. And that is one that Heifetz calls Breakfast of Champions. This is a default story that says, look, God has got this. This is the sovereignty of God story. That now hear me, please. I do believe God is sovereign. But does that allow us to not be disciples making disciples? Because, whoever God has predetermined, some denominations will say, is in the kingdom, and those that aren't in the kingdom. So there's actually a lot of default stories that Christians of all denominations can live into to avoid grappling with this, really difficult adaptive change that we're in. I like to say, I was thinking about this the other day. I have now for 25 years been talking to churches about evangelism. I usually start by unpacking their own fears of evangelism. And I have them write things like, what's your worst fear? What's your worst experience? What are you missing in order to be an evangelist? So when I've done that, I've ended up talking a lot about people's hesitancy around evangelism. I now wonder if that was the right approach. It's true, people are fearful and they have weird images of what evangelism is, and they often think you have to be sort of a Billy Graham character to be an evangelist. But the reality is, it's when people actually start talking to someone else about their faith. And particularly things like focusing on who Jesus is. Taking a look at 3 passages from the Gospels, inviting a grandchild to talk about that with them, or a neighbor, or a colleague, or a friend, or another family member. It's actually when people start doing discipleship that we see the real fruit of a disciple making a disciple. And we see a joy that bubbles up. My favorite class in the intro evangelism course at Wycliffe is the day that we get to talk about the Bible study projects. The students come in so energized to tell me about what happened in these conversations. And, weird things happen. Last year, I had a student, 2019, because of COVID, 2019, I had a student who was preparing for stuff on the subway. She had a long subway ride into the heart of Toronto. On the subway, she was looking through her stuff, planning out what passages she was going to choose to talk about with her friend. And a woman sitting kitty corner to her on the subway said, "Oh, that's interesting. What are you doing?" And it ended up that they had this incredible conversation. They exchanged phone numbers. That actually ended up being a really fruitful little sort of side conversation. We don't know how God is going to work. We just do. We plant seeds, wherever we can. We plant seeds, and we watch to see what God does in, helping those seeds, bringing them to a full harvest. So I would just say, I want to talk less about evangelism, and I want to challenge people to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. There's quite a lot of comment about that. I wanted to pick up on. Some people are saying, is the word too, sort of it's been so abused, is it even usable any longer? And others are saying, well, there's a difference between evangelism and proselytizing.
Oh, yes.
And evangelism in this context, in this new space we find ourselves in. But there's a question, I think, earlier on. I love that thing about disciples making disciples. And someone asked earlier, Jean-Jacques put in a question about language around God and Jesus Christ. I wonder if you could talk a bit more about that in this new space in which we find ourselves. How do we talk about Jesus?
I actually think I think the best thing is we actually need to listen first to where people are at. Sometimes I think, in gardening, you have to actually clear the stones out before you can till the soil. And so you need to find out, what are people's stones, long before you're planting seeds. What are their stones? Questions like, well, what's your experience with the church? What do you think about Christianity? Who do you think Jesus is? It might be uncomfortable for us to listen to their answers, and I don't think you have to defend everything in that setting. I think what's really important is for us to actually listen first. What language do people use? Sometimes the church gets caught up in our own issues, and they're not issues that unchurched people actually have. But I do think we need to first listen to what our, so let's talk Jesus. I was really struck by, it was actually a very long article that was posted to social media by a guy named Paul Kingsnorth. I don't know if any of you have heard of this guy, but he was actually he was raised in an atheistic context. He became a social and environmental activist. He became quite disillusioned with sort of the politics of much of what he saw. He began to be worried that there weren't ethical frameworks guarding and guiding some of what he himself was involved in. He started on a spiritual quest that led him through, I think, just about every major faith group that exists in the world. And fairly recently, he became a Christian in the Orthodox tradition. And his writing about that is really astonishing. I love to read stories, conversion stories, because they can tell us a lot about what people are actually seeking. And you have a sense when you read Paul Kingsnorth's story that God was pursuing him in an astonishing way. I don't know how to explain that. I don't try to demystify God. God forbid we do that. But I do think that we have a very unhealthy image of evangelism. So I don't know if you're interested, but I did prepare some slides that I thought I might be able to get to yesterday on the images of evangelism people often have, the connotations, the experiences even they've had, that the ringing of the doorbell at supper time, and there's the two well-dressed Mormons at the door. Maybe you have an image of someone passing you a tract on the street, maybe somebody even that's very coercive, someone that has used a mechanistic approach to evangelism. Just say these words and you're in. Somebody that a lot of people feel objectified by Christians who have tried to share the faith. It's like they feel like somebody's project. I think all of these approaches to evangelism are actually deeply linked to modernity. They're linked to a mechanistic view of giving people the right information and then, presenting it as almost a sales pitch to them. There was also in the past fear brought in, right? Fear of hell, fear of a judging God. So there have been plenty of really unhealthy approaches to evangelism. It's why in the course in evangelism at Wycliffe, I actually teach about evangelism through the lens of conversion stories of Scripture. One of my favorite is the story of the healing of Naaman. Who are the witnesses in the story? Nobody calls them evangelists. I think they're witnesses. The slave girl who tells her mistress, if only my master could meet the prophet that is in my country, he would heal him of his leprosy. I picture this little girl who has been why does she even want good for her master, her so-called master? She's been carted off from her land, and yet there she is in this foreign land and speaking a word of hope to this general in this foreign army. The servants in the story play a really interesting role. God acts through the servants, and then, of course, God acts through the prophet. I think it's such a fabulous story to teach about witness. The word witness even has a negative connotation. I actually like the language of disciples making disciples. Disciples sharing what they've come to know about God. That's the language I like to use. I say if the word evangelism gets in the way of evangelism, why use it? I kind of hate that we have to ditch the word, but I think it's, the other thing I want to say is God can use anything. So as much as I say passing out a tract on a street to somebody, as a complete stranger, I don't think that's the best way to make a disciple. But I have to tell you, I know people that came to faith that way. So I would just say we have to be careful not to criticize the past. We don't live in the past. I think we have to look at our present culture and say, what are the questions people are asking today? A deeply relational form of evangelism is actually the biblical form, by and large. There are people that come to faith other ways, but even when you look at the life of St. Paul and his extraordinary sort of mystical experience and how that is at the heart of his turning to Christ, still you see someone who reaches out to mentor him in the faith, to disciple him in the faith. So I truly believe that disciples making disciples is actually where we need to go. And I think people, if they can't perceive themselves to be an evangelist, so what? Help them see that they can be a disciple making a disciple.
Oh, thank you. That was beautiful. We're almost out of time. We have 3 minutes to go. I love that idea of disciples making disciples. There was someone put it in the chat, disciples fostering disciples and helping encourage spiritual development. I love it because what you're talking about is relational, and it's also kind of in it for the long haul. We're not talking about, as you say, a more modernist approach, these 3 steps, take this course. It's actually, I want to be in relationship with you.
Yeah, I do think that, if you look at a course like Alpha, what are the components of Alpha? For sure, there's information about the basic faith, but there's also a meal shared. There's a service of prayer for healing. There's a weekend away. These are deeply relational things. I think disciple making is best But I also hear the question that says that word making. That word is a dangerous word. We don't actually make disciples, do we? We have to be really clear about that. The conversion of the human heart is a work of the Holy Spirit. What we do, the definition of evangelism I actually use is helping people, empowered by the Holy Spirit, first off, helping people take steps towards becoming an apprentice of Jesus. An apprentice, a disciple has become a religious word, but an apprentice, that's an active word. It means you're learning things, you're learning new ways, you're learning new practices. And as disciples, I like the word cultivating disciples, actually. I love that imagery of cultivating, because I do think that if you think about the process of planting a garden, you clear the stones, you till the soil, you put down fertilizer, first off. Eventually you get, when the condition is right, you plant the seeds. And then you water, you wait, you water, you wait, you weed. In other words, it is a process. Most people, not everybody, but most people come to faith over a period of years. So I say, let's not wait any longer to get started. That's the main thing. Let's get started now.
Wow. Well, thank you, Judy. That is a really great thought to end on. You've given us so much to think about and some really great action steps for us to talk about in our communities of faith. So thank you so much for your generosity and passion for this. Thank you for blessing us.
It's been great to be with you, and I hope that you'll take the step of moving from talking about it, because as Anglicans we are really good about that, to just launching out, experimenting, try some new things, maybe even try the Bible study project in your own church.
What a great challenge, the Bible study project. There you go. That's the challenge for us. Great. Thank you.
Great to be with you all.
So over to head table.
Do I have sound? Judy, thank you so much. It's been a real blessing, and I know that it's been really stimulating for our members of Synod. We've been watching the chat go flying by, and lots of responses and lots of thank yous to you. And we hope that you'll keep in touch. And I'm sorry we weren't able to have you to Montreal, because Montreal in the spring is quite lovely. And
I do love it. We lived in Montreal for 2 years when I was in grad school, and we lived in the Côte des Neiges area, and we love that city.
It has so many wonderful corners to it. So God bless you, and keep us in your prayers, as especially in these 10 days of prayer for God's kingdom to blossom and flourish more in our diocese.
That'll be my prayer as well. Thank you all. It's been great to be with you.
Friends, we now have a 5-minute stand up and do what you need to do for 5 minutes break. And we resume with the financial statements at 10:58. See you soon. Hi, Edelmira, did you have a question? Your hand was up. Can she unmute herself or?
I will allow her to talk.
Yeah.
She's
okay. So reminder that the balloting is open right now, that you should have received an email from the Anglican Diocese of Montreal. And that there are 2 links in there and an elector ID and a password. If you use the longer link in your email, you don't actually have to put in your elector ID. It's a dedicated link. If you use the short link, then you have to know your ID and password. Just note it down if you want, but easiest thing is use the long link and vote. About half of you have voted already so far, so that's good. And it should be, yeah, that information should have been received. So Peggy, if you go back to the email that came in and click on the long link, that's there. The second link in the email, that's got all the information in it with your own ID. Great, Wendy's already voted. Lots of us are underway. So balloting is open for a bit longer, so please don't make us wait to have those results. Vote as often as you can. No, vote as soon as you can. I'm going to invite our treasurer, Mr. Ron O'Connell, to speak to us, and also our finance director, Stephen Tam, to come on as well.
Hello, everyone. We have 3 years to talk about right now. The results for 2020, the plans for 2021, and the budget for 2022. As I said in my video, we have incurred a loss of $1.8 million in 2020. And I describe how that came to be. Without going into the details again, are there any questions, anything that people are wondering about last year? I'm open to questions. I guess from my screen, I can't see if there are any.
So Ron, we're just watching for messages. Folks, raise your hand if you have a question or put it in the Q&A, I think. Is that right?
Yes, or if they raise their hand.
If you raise your hand, we'll open your mic for you. And Edelmira? Edelmira has a question. We'll open your mic for you, Edelmira. If you unmute too. Edelmira Harrison from Trinity St. Bruno.
Edelmira, are you there?
Oh, yeah. Edelmira, go ahead. Your mic is.
Yeah, I'm trying to vote and I'm not getting.
Okay, that's a separate thing. It's about voting.
Yeah, okay.
So we'll try to take you offline for that. And
yeah, thank you.
Any questions for the Treasurer and Director of Finance?
This is pertaining to last year's audited financial statements. If there are no questions, I would like to.
George Ryder has a question. George?
Yes, yeah, good afternoon, Ron. I sent you a question yesterday, I believe, because I'm still wondering, in terms of your investments, whether because the diocese is rather being particular about what you're investing in, does that not reflect your investment outcome? because you're not taking any big risks.
Yes, there's no question about that. And, but we're not ready to pass a motion to change our investment policy, although we know what we're going to propose and the intent to have that passed at the next diocesan council. Now, in terms of, I guess in my video, I really talked about the desire to move to, say, a more proactive way of investing, which would involve ESG, environmental, social, and governance issues. However, I did not mention that we're also looking at the percentage of money that's allocated to different investment classes. To date, we have got quite a bit of money devoted to fixed income that doesn't really contribute much to earnings. And as we go down the road with the very real possibility that inflation will force interest rates to climb, there's nothing but losses there now. In our present position, all our investments in fixed income are short term, so we will not be hurt. However, on the other hand, we haven't gained any money on that for the longest time. Did I answer?
It's like putting your money in the bank and earning 3% interest or something like that, right?
Or less. Even 3% would be risky. So it tends to be a lot lower.
You were talking in your video, for instance, because I had circled SRI. So it's not the SRI that you want to. So you're saying you're going to ESG rather than SRI?
No, I'm saying that ESG does not, is not inconsistent with SRI. SRI was mainly a very defensive posture that says we won't invest in unethical type companies.
Right.
And I named the kinds of things that be represented.
I'm with you on that. Yeah.
Yeah. However, ESG does not preclude the concerns of SRI.
No. But are you like investing in like banks and so on and so forth?
Yes.
Or like what classes of investment are you doing? Why I'm asking that is because you see a lot of what we might think are, sort of like good investments might be also those companies are investing in issues like, oil and gas or kind of thing.
Absolutely. I mean, the whole world is connected,
Yeah.
So all you can do is do your best to pick companies that don't have a significant amount of percentage of their investments in undesirable, let's say, investments. I mean, you look at, we're also invested in Bell, and other telecoms who have a small connection to adult entertainment, for example.
Exactly.
It's we do our best to minimize.
Well, I mean, your goal though in the end is to try to gain income, right? I mean, it's not okay. Yeah,
well,
you can
also,
be responsible, but
at
the same time, you don't want to lose.
The other aspect that we want to emphasize is the manager and the detail fund managers that they select are engaged with the companies that they're invested in. to try to change their practices. And if that's not happening, they'll drop the investment. And if the detail managers are not actively staying with that kind of thing, they'll get dropped by our investment manager.
I think we need to move on to another question. There was a question about what the formula is for the government to apply the CEWS, the wage subsidy, and how that's calculated at our place.
Stephen?
So I noticed there's a few questions about the subsidy, so I'll answer them all right now. First of all, someone asked if we received the subsidy and if it has to be paid back. So in 2020, we received about $1.8 million as a whole, Synod office and the parishes. And no, this does not have to be paid back. Someone also asked about the rate. It seems to differ every month. The rate actually depends on the revenue that the diocese is earning from month to month, and it's actually compared to the prior year. So for example, in January 2020, it's compared to January 2019. So the rate all depends on our decrease in revenue. So that's why what we charge to the parishes also differs from month to month. There was also a question about the amount that's showing up on our financial statements from 2020, $158,000. This is actually the net of what the Synod office received and the actual Synod office costs. So that 158 is only pertaining to the Synod office and other priests who are covered under the diocesan budget, such as curates and some priests that are subsidized by the Synod office.
Thank you, Stephen. There's a question from Jim Pratt.
Yes, following up on George's question on the investments. I know the return on the Anglican Balance Fund was substantially lower than the return my parish received on our own investments outside of that fund. Did the withdrawals by the diocese, and because of the timing of those withdrawals when the market was down, did that have an impact on the returns?
Peggy.
Stephen, can you answer that question in terms of the timing of the withdrawals?
No, I don't believe those withdrawals had too much of an impact on the returns. I mean, the returns were impacted a lot by what was happening during the pandemic.
For instance, do you recall what month we took the withdrawal?
Most of the withdrawals were done in the later half of the year.
Sorry, I didn't get that.
So a lot of the returns that Father Jim is referring to, there was a huge loss in the first quarter and even the second quarter of 2020 because of what was happening with the pandemic and just the way that the Anglican Balance Fund is structured in terms of our holdings.
The fund was down quite a bit to the end of October. And
starting in the last quarter of 2020.
Comeback started in November last year. That's when it started to turn around and has continued this year. So if we took money out before Lecco Brasso started to recover, then we would have lost some opportunity. Not sure if we've answered your question.
Not quite. That may be something to discuss further at the AGM of the Anglican Fund.
Okay.
So I have a question from Patricia Kirkpatrick. And oh, gone. If you unmute yourself, Patricia. Okay, not there. Graham Singh has a question. Go ahead, Graham.
Thank you, Bishop. Thank you, Ron and Stephen. My question is really meant I hope you hear it in a very friendly, constructive way, and it really is meant that way. My question is, if we weren't a church governed the way we are today, if you could wave a magic wand, let me put it that way, and you had just dispersed nearly $2 million of our funds to help us through the pandemic, for which I, for one, am very grateful. I'm also grateful on behalf of St. Jack's for the social purpose investment that has been made into what we're doing, which is part of the diocesan investments. But if there were no restrictions on what we could do going forward in restructuring the way we're using capital in the diocese to look to the future, what are the crazy ideas that you wish you could do that haven't been discussed yet, but which might be interesting to Synod to begin thinking about? And are there any of those ideas which are worth considering in other forms of discussion in the future? It's a big blue sky question. What have we learned? What could we do better that would be the kind of crazy version of going forward? And I mean this about the way parishes share wealth or hold wealth to themselves, the way we govern our buildings, and the way we're invested in the future, not just in operations, but in capital improvements as well. What are the crazy ideas that we might all want to hear more about?
Well, those kinds of things are really covered by the bishop and Robert. I could answer to how we can get the best returns on the investments that we're making. But in terms of placing money out there to support growth, that is not something, I have my own opinions, which I would discuss with Robert and Mary, but I wouldn't want to say anything in this forum because they probably have their own ideas about that.
Can I remind you, friends, that if you have a question that you pose it in the Q&A, not in the chat. The chat flies by at a great rate. I will just say, somebody asked, has a new investment manager been chosen yet?
Yeah, we are working with one investment manager right now, and I expect that in a few weeks we'll declare who that person is. We have worked with at least 4 different investment managers, exploring the ways in which they approach investing, and we've homed in on one, and we're working on the details now. So I would prefer to wait for a couple of weeks before we make that announcement, but we're down to one.
A couple of other comments that came in, and this is the last I'm reading out of the chat, is there a plan to utilize the maximum of the subsidies while returning the diocesan assessment? And since the subsidy is related to last year's income, is there discussion to bring back at a rate slowly to balance the income requirements and still maximize the financial relief to the parishes? Maybe too complicated to.
Well, for 2021, the comparison is to actually 2019 and not 2020 because the pandemic took place during 2020, so it would be unreasonable to compare 2021 to 2020. So in the calculation of the subsidy for 2021, the revenue is being compared to 2019. And again, the rate all depends on the decrease between the current month in 2021 and what it was in 2019. So right now, it's hard to predict what it would be, for the rest of the year because we need to have the year play out before we can actually do a comparison between 2021 and 2019.
Question from Jennifer Bork in the Q&A. Does the $157,565 amount for government assistance represent the totality of the wage replacement subsidy received, i.e. including for salaries that would otherwise show up on parish ledgers?
So I had answered that earlier, but just to reiterate, the 158 is actually the net amount that the Synod office staff and also priests that are covered by the diocesan budget.
Right. Sorry about that. And Tim Penning's question, I think, went back up on the Q&A about balancing the income requirements. Somebody's commented in the chat, and you may want to respond to this, that their parish did well and they're planning to give us back the money. Is there a comment about that? Will that mess up our income?
In terms of being eligible for the wage subsidy, it's possible. If enough people did that,
So let's ask them to be in touch with Stephen about that. It hasn't been sent yet, so thank you so much. Let's see, anything else, Robert?
Yeah, while we're talking about the wage subsidy, at this moment, the government did talk about extending the wage subsidy to September. To my knowledge, that legislation has yet to pass. Officially, wage subsidies expire at the end of May. Is that right, Stephen?
That's right. So instead of expiring at the end of this month, the proposal is extended to September 30th. And if it is decided that we do extend it to September 30th, that would mean that we would not be invoicing assessments again until the last quarter of 2021. So we will have not invoiced parishes for 9 months of assessments. And this would mean that our total diocesan assessments would decrease by about $675,000. So the operating loss for 2021, instead of being about $733,000, it'll be just a little over $1 million.
It's worth observing, for those of you who don't know about all this, that $1 million taken out of our investments represents at least $40,000 income, investment income, plus on a good year, at least $40,000 growth to the fund. So the Anglican Balance Fund doesn't give us all the growth, but it does give us 4% interest. Parishes get that, and they get the 4% growth. And some parishes who are invested privately for some of their funding may be taking all the growth as well and calling that a better income, but that's how that's working. Comment or question from Dion Lewis. To follow with Reverend Graham's question, can we have an open forum that would allow the diocese as a whole to look at these different models? Do you, either of you want to speak to that? Does Synod, Synod, if you want to speak to that, you can raise your hands. Okay. Well, Sally Filippo has her hand up. Please speak, Sally. You have to unmute. Your hand is down. Did you not want to speak? Okay. Well, oh, there you are, Sally. Go. All right.
We need time for the budget 22.
All right. So now,
Do we need a motion to pass the statements for 2020?
yes,
Robert?
we do. Yes, we do.
So it was moved by Ron O'Connell, seconded by myself, that the audited financial statements as published in the convening circular under pages 103 to 126 be received.
Synod, are you prepared to vote? All in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Thank you. The motion is carried. Thank you, Ron and Stephen. We're now going to move to the budget. And we need to, through that, also give council an indication of the thinking of the House of Synod on what we should be doing next about assessments.
The budget is published in your convening circular, pages 92 through 95.
So pages 92 through 95, you'll find the budget in the convening circular.
So again, George has asked, both George and Dion have asked for an open forum. We asked anyone if they had any comments. Nobody made any comments. Just to be aware that there have been no comments made. Both George and Dion asked for an open forum. We asked Synod if they wanted to make any comments, and nobody requested to make comments. Dion Lewis would like to speak.
Please go ahead, Dion. Thank you. The open forum to really discuss those questions that Graham mentioned, I guess we should think about that, because since our parishes are going to be coming into a new way of being after we get past this pandemic, and it might be a good time to take some time to actually look at different ways of helping each other out that comes away from the capitalistic model that we currently use now. So it's really to try to look at a different way of working together and sharing our resources. And maybe a synod might not be the best way of actually fostering those types of discussions, but a separate forum that we can actually discuss and actually dream big. Thank you. Thank you. I think that's what I interpreted in your question, was not that we were going to deal with it right this minute, but this is the kind of thing that Diocesan Council would normally be able to wrestle through. And Diocesan Council is elected, but people can be present if they're interested in the conversations. So we're back to looking at the budget for the coming year, 2022. Believe it or not, it's coming. And are there any things you want to say, Stephen and Ron?
No, I think it was covered quite well by Stephen in his notes, showing what changes we're proposing different from the budget for this year. There's a small increase in diocesan assessments. It's after a long period of time where we haven't collected assessments, but it's just a small increase. And other than that, all the expenses are being kept under control. There's some minor changes. Again, they were in the notes that Stephen provided. And it still results in an operating loss of close to $440,000 a year.
So
And
you're going to put the motion on the floor? Or are we going to
Yeah.
discuss more first? We put the motion on the floor, then we can, it's open for discussion, and then we'll come to.
Okay. So I'm proposing that budget be passed by Synod.
Okay, and it's seconded by Robert Camara. And so the motion is on the floor. And are there people who want to speak to the budget?
So if you have your hand up, you want to speak to the budget. Mary Pickup. Oh, okay.
Okay.
Do you want to ask if there's a general sort of feeling from Synod as to what they'd like Diocesan Council, as this question comes to us, it's about forgiveness of diocesan September.
Yep. So Diocesan Council will be looking at this question of whether we charge assessments or not for September. Is that right? And from June to September. So Diocesan Council will meet soon after Synod, and we would need an indication from the House of Synod, the whole Synod, about the direction you think we should be going in, whether you think we should be forgiving assessments for 3 more months and topping up our deficit again to over $1 million, or whether you think it's time to stop that and move back into assessments. Anybody want to speak to that? Please. Jim Pratt?
I would encourage council to look at maybe easing parishes back in, not completely, and work with Stephen Tam so that the subsidy is declining gradually. Parishes get used to paying the assessment again, maybe half, quarter, half, 3/4, working up that way.
Thank you. Are there any other comments?
Keith Schmidt.
Keith Schmidt?
Yes, I would just encourage Diocesan Council to continue it on until the end of time. Well, there are parishes that obviously have done very well during the pandemic. There are also many parishes that are struggling. And I think this is something that's being offered to Canadians, and one should take the opportunity to take it up.
Okay. That means we should reduce our income as a diocese so that your parish can benefit. Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying I would regard this more as an investment by the diocese in the parishes, which is needed at this time. I'm not sure I would consider it just to be useless spending. It is investment during a time of a pandemic, the first one in 100 years. If there's ever a time for the diocese to do it, it is now.
Thank you very much. Are there others who wish to speak? Jim Pratt again. A reminder, you have 1 minute. Really, you've spoken already on this motion, so the Chancellor could be feeling gnarly and say you can't. But
No, I did not want to speak again. I think.
Oh, your hand was just up.
My hand was just still up, I guess.
Okay, thanks. Michael Robson.
Am I unmuted now?
Yes, you are. Go ahead.
Yes. I also support the idea of continuing with the subsidy. I want to speak on behalf of a parish where it has been a very big benefit and has helped us to get through the last year and into this year. I certainly would hope that parishes that have been more successful and have been able to build up reserves will look at that and in a way that doesn't impact too negatively on the diocesan income will find a way of helping to rebuild those reserves and that we all can do so as things hopefully improve. But for now, this is money that the government is offering to us quite legitimately. It is helping to protect the jobs of our clergy and other employees, and I would encourage that we take advantage of it.
Thank you. I have Graham Singh. Have a minute.
Thank you, Bishop. I support the motion, but I do hope that in every place we're touching money, we could change. And in the comments that have been exchanged so far this morning on financial related issues, I do think we need to clearly signal this is a time of radical change. It could be that this kind of subsidy is used to push parishes to change. I don't think we should take advantage of parishes, but at the same time, we should recognize the extraordinary means that are being diverted from diocesan funds to the parishes. And I think we should use this opportunity to do that. I don't really, from my time on Diocesan Synod, I didn't see us discussing these kinds of issues. And I still believe that some kind of special discussion for the diocese, as we've been hearing in the chat, on the way we deploy resources. And I specifically mean between parishes and the diocese. I'm very glad at what's been done, but I think looking forward to the future, this needs an extraordinary forum for this kind of discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Jennifer Bork has a question. Could you outline the relative costs and benefits, financial and ethical, of charging assessments and presumably foregoing the federal subsidies? Ron?
Yeah,
Stephen?
I'm just not.
Stephen, can you jump in?
I'm not sure how we answer this. I don't think there's any moral or ethical. I mean, you know, when we looked at helping the parishes by not collecting assessments, we knew that it was going to hurt the diocesan investments because that's just about the only place that we can tap to cover significant losses. And we've done that. So on the other hand, looking at the broader picture, which includes the parishes, the diocese consists not just the head office, but all the parishes are not collecting assessments. Theoretically, that money remains with the parishes. And then we benefit from collecting the assessments on top of that. So the feeling was that when you add it all together, that we were further ahead together supporting the parishes. Now, when I made the comment that the money has stayed in the parishes, you know, for those that are not doing well, of course, they say, well, we never got the revenues while this was going on, which, you know, I guess, and a lot of that loss had to do with rentals. Those who have a model of making ends meet via rentals have been really hurt with this pandemic. And those that have less reliance on that and have good support from their parishioners have done quite well. So it's a mixed bag of results out there.
Thank you, Ron. There's a comment that might go along with this. If we go with assessments, will the rules concerning the viability of parishes still be upheld? Assessments are based on the income of a parish. Isn't that right?
That's right.
Usually we pay our insurance in several installments over the year, says Jim Pratt. If we pay off the bill now, does that count as revenue for the diocese and impact the wage subsidy? No.
It's not revenue.
Mm-hmm. Well, what I do know in my little learnings about this business is if we charge you assessments and you don't pay them, we are still deemed to have received that income, and you are in the accounts receivable department. So just because you don't pay us for something, if we're not paid for the stipends that we have already paid our clergy, but through the central payroll, the parishes haven't paid the diocese. The diocese is still deemed to have received your assessments, whether you've paid them or not. And if you're in the accounts receivable department, the government doesn't count that. That's right, Stephen? Ron?
Yes. So we use the accrual method of accounting. So basically, once we invoice, it gets posted to the accounts receivable, and the church may pay immediately or they might pay 3 months down the road, but our revenue has been booked on that day.
Thank you very much. There's lots of chatting going in. Another Q&A. Pardon? Margaret Simpson has her hand up. Go ahead.
I just have a really simple sort of bottom line question. Does the money we get from the subsidy that goes into the parishes, is that more or less than we would get if we collected money from the parishes? In other words, is the diocese winning in this calculation? Is more money coming into the diocese, when you consider parish plus head office, from the subsidies than we could hope to collect?
So Peggy, in 2020, the diocese as a whole received about $1.8 million from the wage subsidy. We didn't charge assessments for 9 months, so we lost about $770,000. So in the end, the diocese received about $985,000. So as a whole, the diocese is definitely doing better by not charging assessments and applying for the subsidy.
Right, and I personally hope that the wealthier churches who did well out of this will consider donating back to the diocese when this is over, and you don't have to worry about screwing up the wage subsidy by donating back. But that, of course, is not guaranteed. Thank you.
Somebody commented, Stephen Tam shared a really interesting document at Diocesan Council, and that would be useful perhaps for people to see the overall benefit. I don't know if that's possible to send out. Pardon? No, or send it to them. You can show it.
Stephen, which of these slides that you prepared would be best to illustrate your point?
So this is the slide that I just used to respond to Peggy's question about what is the overall effect on the diocese. So I'll just reiterate, in 2020, we came out ahead as a whole, about $985,000. For this year, if we're just looking at not charging assessments for the first 5 months of the year. We're going to lose about $375,000 in diocesan assessment revenue. The diocese as a whole should get about $985,000 from the wage subsidy, and therefore we're going to have a net cash inflow of $610,000. So to summarize, as a whole, the diocese will benefit from applying for the wage subsidy and not charging assessments. I mean, we're able to do this. I think Ron had mentioned we're able to do this because we have a strong balance sheet. Our equity and our investments can withstand these types of losses, but we can't continue to do this. I mean, for the last few years, we've been losing from operations about $400,000 or so. And last year, we lost about $1 million from operations. This year, we're forecasting about $750,000. So, I mean, 2 years of this is, I mean, we're able to sustain it because of our strong balance sheet, but a couple more years of this, and you know, it's really going to hurt our investments and our retained earnings.
Thank you. Jean Wilcox says, if I vote for this budget, am I voting to not accept wage subsidy and allow DIO to resume parish assessments? No, that's...
No. It's the question about the subsidies pertains to 2021. The 2022 budget at this point. I'm thinking that everybody, all of us are hoping that we're past this pandemic and back into, say, more normal times, but different somehow. And so we're not thinking of wage subsidies in 2022. Of course, like if everything fell apart in terms of the pandemic, who knows what could happen? I mean, we had a budget for 2020 and 2021 that were put aside to deal with the reality of the situation that we found ourselves in. So I think a vote for 2022 does not preclude anything. It's a plan for 2022, and let's see what happens.
Also, as of today, the federal government has suggested that it might extend the wage subsidy till September, but there is no talk at this point. In fact, the September wage subsidy is on a decreasing scale, so they're looking to wean the country off of the wage subsidy, suggesting that it will no longer be available after September. So one would imagine that in 2022, when this budget comes into play, there will be no wage subsidy to even think about applying for. So the wage subsidy is not a question involved in this particular budget.
So I would just remind Synod that don't wait till we stop subsidizing you for you to ramp up your robust givings program. That Neil Mancor, who is our congregational development person, has all sorts of things to help you with your stewardship and to help reach out to and motivate the people you have contact with who have been supporting your church. This is part of this viability of parishes, is parishes that rely on rental income to a very great extent get themselves into more difficulty. So just reminder that now's the time to get busy with getting your parishioners to pledge and to contribute and to commit to supporting the ministry. Question from who? I've got one on here on the Q&A. All right, Brian Perron had his hand up first before Tim Pennings put his message in. Okay, Brian?
Yes, good morning. I think we have to continually look at viability and stewardship. When we talk of money coming from the diocese are ourselves, our people. When we talk of money coming from the government is us. So whenever we receive money from any entity, we have to make sure that there's a viability in where that money goes, that money that is being invested gives us a return of impact, of mission, et cetera, et cetera. And so we have gold mines in all of our churches, but some of those churches need to really rethink. We've been able, in the last two churches that Joyce and I have been into, to remove deficits and to increase impact where we're truly visible. And so if we can do that, or we were blessed to be able to do that in these last two churches, our churches really need to take a look at it, that we can't just keep taking money from either ourselves as representatives of the government of Canada or from the diocese if we're not going to see true impact. And so this whole idea of weaning off, churches have to start looking at increasing their funds, but increasing their impact, working with partners that rent space as partners, not simply using the space. Last year, we got rid of all the for-profit companies and we replaced them with not-for-profit companies that continue to pay their rent and bring impact to our community. I think I've hit my minute. All of this to say is that we cannot just keep taking money and dumping it into the same thing we've done for the last 5 years. We need to not only rethink, but we need to start doing things now. Because would you take your own personal money and invest in something that does not give impact? I don't think so.
Thank you, Brian. Tim Pennings has a question. Can the assessments be planed to increase to the recovery from this over the next X years, since the assessment is based off revenue based on the parish's income assumable in previous years? Is this in discussion? I don't know if there was enough clear on that.
So the question, I think, is can we plan to increase the assessment in future years to make up for the loss that we're losing this year, in these years?
Can we plan to increase the assessment to make up for the loss that we've lost this year? So sorry, I was reading too quickly and there's a few typos that I missed. Any thoughts, Stephen or Ron?
Well, I liked very much what Brian had to say. That's really at the heart of rethinking. I think people have to really rethink how they're doing church. And mission and paying attention to your financial situation and having people support what's going on is really important. I agree with Robert that what we're going to do is we're going to gradually increase assessments, and that's going to put more heat on parishes to look hard at how they're doing church.
Right, so the assessment in 2019 was $1,025,000, and the assessment for this year was budgeted to be $900,000. It didn't actually happen. And the assessment for next year is budgeted for $950,000. So, Tim, it already is it already was lowered significantly, and it is now being moved back up a little bit. Is that accurate, Stephen and Ron?
Yeah, and there are fewer communities involved, and so individual assessments will be on a percentage basis higher than that would seem to indicate.
Right. So the weight, the weight of all that will be shared by fewer people. Mm-hmm. Question on the budget? I keep forgetting. There's so many places to keep track of. I'm sorry.
No, my saying is, can we call the question?
Oh, can we call the question? Are we ready to vote on the budget as presented today? All in favor of this budget, please signify by raising your hand. The motion is carried. Thank you very much. And thank you so much, Ron and Stephen, for the work you've done for this and for your patience with us as we try to understand things that are clear to you. Balloting is about to close, and it says that we have a 5-minute break. Probably just to stand up and turn around and put the blood back in our legs. If you haven't voted, has everybody voted
No,
yet?
there's about a dozen or so people who have not yet voted. Please check your email and cast your ballots so that the ballots can be calculated.
If you have not received an email, you must send us a chat, I think, to
No,
say.
it's doing Q&A. We can't follow the
Oh,
chat.
in Q&A. Send us a Q&A to tell us that you haven't received your email, but do check your trash first, because unaccountably we may end up in your trash. Ron O'Connell's got his hand up. Ron?
Oh, that was a vote
Leftover?
for the budget, and I didn't put it back down. Oh, by the way, like I just opened my email. What is my elector ID?
Well, if you go to the bottom of there's 2 links. If you choose the link, the second link, everything's in that second link. So you don't even have to have your numbers.
Oh.
But if between the first link and the second
Okay, I guess
is that
that's the
information.
first one, eh?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
click on the
thank
second
you.
link.
Yeah.
We got some music to play. Is something going on now?
Patrick Wheeler and Jessica Pickford.
Yeah, try and answer. Well,
I think that goes through. Oh, yeah, because.
Oh, thank you.
Microphone's on.
Okay, folks, can we call you back to Synod? Just clarifying a few things. Reminder that some of these difficulties we were having here can be solved if you people remember to register under your own name and not somebody else's link. And that seems to be one of the hiccups we've got right now. But our returns to Synod of information like who are your Synod delegates and what is their current email and those sorts of things are helpful. I'm supposed to tell you that balloting is going to close. I don't see a clock right now. It's covered up with Q&A.
It's 12:02.
Are we going to close balloting at 12:10 anyway?
Yeah, well, it automatically does it.
All right, balloting is automatically closing at 12:10. So if you don't vote before 12:09, I think that's not going to happen this year. I'm going to call Dion Lewis on screen to give us an update on the anti-racism task force. And he's got a 20-minute window. Okay, Dion? We got Dion?
Hi. Thank you, Bishop Mary.
Oh, great, there you are. Yeah, I see him.
He's not highlighted. Can you highlight spotlight, sorry?
Thank you, Bishop Mary. Members of Synod and guests of Synod, I'm not going to take the whole 20 minutes. Last year, Synod passed a motion to work on dismantling anti-Black racism in the Diocese of Montreal. Edward Yankee and I are the co-chairs of the Anti-Racism Task Force. And we have been given this time to update Synod on the work of the task force up until now and inform you of upcoming events. The members of the task force are Reverend Deborah Meister, Reverend Deborah Noonan-Zink, Reverend Christopher Bell, Reverend James Pratt, and Mr. Jean-Bridie Saint-Ville. We have also invited different guests and advisors to come and be helpful companions to the task force along the way so far. Those are Ms. Camille Isaacs-Morel, Reverend Graham Singh, and Reverend Jason Crawford. Our task force adopted this as our mission statement: to educate and increase awareness in the Anglican Diocese of Montreal of the history of racism and the Church's participation and complicity in racist practices, that we may properly repent. To equip and enable members of the diocese to confront and dismantle systemic racism and white supremacy inside and outside the Church. To honor Christ's presence in every human by building bridges and promoting and celebrating diversity in the Church and the world. The task force sent out a survey to all the leaders of our local church communities. Thank you to everyone that took the time to answer and give their input. The results of this survey helped the task force to determine the main concerns and the missing pieces that we need to overcome, and as a diocese, provide support for. The results showed generally that we do not know enough about the history of the Church and how it has been used to distort and homogenize the diversity that God has created. It also highlighted that individually, we each must take the time to reflect on our own personal commitment to be an anti-racist so that our communities become anti-racist. Furthermore, some responses to the survey gave some concrete ways to change our diocesan and provincial structures in order to make room for a leadership team that reflected the members of the diocese even more than it does now. The task force discussed and noted that there's a lack of formal integration programs and representation in diocesan decision-making, which sort of leads to the perception that as a diocese, we might not regard ethnic congregations with equal importance as largely white congregations. The task force is diligently studying all the suggestions and looking at setting about proposals to implement those changes that would work in our context here. Stay tuned, because these proposals will be coming forth from the task force and will be on the floor in the coming synod gatherings, should God spare our lives and allow us to continue to bring about the kingdom of heaven on earth. The task force has also been compiling and critiquing current written, audio, and video resources, and making connections with many community organizations and ecumenical partners that have implemented educational programs locally and in Canada. And I should add, in the States also. This included attending some of the mandatory training programs that the United Church offers for all their clergy and lay leaders. And we also reviewed resources offered by the World Council of Churches. The task force has also collected resources for parents and children in the discussion of racism. The task force, via our bishop, is supporting the work of the anti-racism working group at the national church level. All these resources will be listed and soon will be accessible via a dedicated page on the diocesan website. And we will continue to review current faith-based anti-racism programs in order to create or design a training for our lay and clergy leaders. The goal for this is to make it a mandatory and renewable requirement. A next initiative from the task force is to have a private Facebook page for the members of our diocese to, quote, share ideas and to support one another in rooting out racism in ourselves, our churches, and our world. That page will be called Montreal Anglicans for Racial Justice and Equity. As I said, it is a private group, and as soon as we complete our branding and logo and terms of reference and everything for that page, we will start inviting members of the diocese to start to comment and share on this page. The members of the Anti-Racism Task Force will be the moderators of this page. Something new that's coming up at the beginning of October. At the beginning of October, the Anti-Racism Task Force in the Diocese of Montreal will be holding a 2-session workshop on the history of systematic racism in the church. It'll be an interactive workshop that's geared to all the leaders in our diocese and our neighboring ones. Our first session should be covering looking back to look forward. It should cover topics of imperialism, colonialism and its aftermath, God, church, and commerce, and religion and racial inequality. The second session would be called Addressing the Present to Move into the Future. How do we get beyond thoughts and prayers? And church leaders as social and political activists, and the church's role and responsibility to equity, diversity, and inclusion. Please be on the lookout for this offering and encourage all your lay and clergy leaders to attend. Let me quote from the bishop's charge. All of us in the diocese are asked to take on the work of education and increased awareness of subconscious and conscious attitudes and behaviors that undermine racial justice and equity in our society. Let me add to what Bishop Mary said. When we all really start to do this work, we are just aiming for the goal of creating the society that Christ calls us to live in and be a leader in the Anglican Church in Canada and the world. I think it adds in directly to what Judy Paulson said before. We're preparing the ground. We have to look at the stones that we each other have and hold and remove them from the field in order that we can plant growth that will be sustainable. Please feel free to email us at theantiracism@montreal.anglican.ca if you need help from us on anything in regard to this topic. And the task force would be happy to be resources to clergy and lay leaders if they would like support to initiate conversations, book studies, and the like in your church communities. Bishop Mary, members of the Synod, thank you very much for giving us the time to give you this report back.
Thank you so much, Dion, and all the members of the task force. Can one of you put the email address into the chat, perhaps, if you want to make it available so that those who were looking at you and didn't write it down could have it. Are there any questions that people would like to ask? Any questions? Let me see. Hands up if you have a question or no questions. That's great.
And I was reading quickly while I was giving my report. And yes, I'm aware of the Diocese of New Westminster and their mandatory training. We're just about to interface with them to actually get that and review it. Thank you.
And Dion, you did mention that an exciting workshop is happening October 1st and 2nd. And Deborah has put that in the chat as well. Mark your calendars. More information will follow as soon as we can get it out there. Thank you. Let's see, there's a Q&A. Can we get Dion's report to read?
It's online.
It is online. That's right. Sorry, somebody
Wait.
asked.
Online is the Synod report. I can actually send through what I said. It's not going to be exactly what I said, but I can send that through to you guys. Thank you.
That's great. So on our diocesan website, montreal.anglican.ca /Synod, look for the Synod things. There's a separate report there for the anti-racism task force. Thank you for asking that, Carolyn. Any other questions? I'll just check here. All right, I think we're good. Thank you so much, Dion. Our next person is Gwenda Wells, who's going to speak to us, give us an update on the Anglican Foundation.
We need more light on me. I am so sorry. Here, let's see if I can help.
Gwenda, I'm going to play your video first. Is that all right?
I was going to do a wee intro, if I could, just to put it in some context. Does that make sense? Hello, Synod. It's good to be here on behalf of the Anglican Foundation, and specifically of its current initiative to fund wonderful, creative post-pandemic programming for children and youth. I think that probably in our diocese, a lot of people actually need to discover the foundation a lot better. I know I did. When Bishop Mary asked me if I'd be willing to take on this liaison role, I knew the foundation mostly as an invaluable source of funds for renovations in churches and halls. And I think those are the parishes in our diocese that do know it and have been contributing. There is, however, a core group of people who know the foundation in depth for its range of programs, who have been very supportive of it for years within this diocese, but reaching out to all of our country, coast to coast to coast. I think that for those of us who have been faithful contributors to initiatives in our own diocese, our own missions and outreach, our own theology, our own theological college, and also internationally to the Primates Fund, it's like the Anglican Foundation is a piece in the middle. It really does link Canadians across the country in paying it forward. Donner au prochain. J'aime tellement cette expression qui nous donne le sens de contribuer vers l'avant et aussi de donner à ceux qui nous entourent. Isn't that a great way of saying pay it forward? That's really what the Anglican Foundation is about. And I'd like to turn it over now to Canon Judy Royce, the Executive Director of the Foundation.
In a year like no other, when the world said no, no to voices uplifted in song, no to kneeling side by side, no to exchanging the peace, no to the common cup, the Anglican Foundation of Canada said yes. Yes to the health and well-being of vulnerable children, families, and communities. Yes to reducing poverty. Yes to climate care. Yes to preserving churches. Yes to theological education and leadership. Yes to a robust COVID-19 response. And now in the spring of 2021, we launched Say Yes to Kids, a campaign to raise $100,000 to support Canadian children and young people as they face a post-pandemic world. With all they've had to endure, the social isolation, limited recreation, the exposure to disharmony at home, depression, sleep difficulties, emotional struggles, the Anglican Foundation of Canada wants to ensure that money is available for homework clubs, nutrition, food security, individual and group tutoring, safe outdoor recreation, exercise, camping, and mental health supports. Your foundation rep is Gwenda Wells, and I invite you to be in touch with her, or you can go to our website, anglicanfoundation.org/kids. It was Archbishop Desmond Tutu who once said, "Do your little bit of good where you are, because it's those little bits of good put together that can change everything." So let's do our little bits of good to support the health and well-being of Canadian children and youth in this amazing country we call home.
In a year of many demands on our money and our energies, I think there is something here that really reaches out and connects with them. I know that many of you attended the Reverend Grace Burston's workshop on doing ministry with children, and I'm wondering if there might be some inspiration that might have come out of that. I'm also so pleased that I came in right after my good friend Dion's presentation, because I sense that there may well be opportunities for programming that would benefit our anti-racism work. I do know that in the past, two programs of this diocese that benefited from this Say Yes to Kids, Dites Oui aux Jeunes funding were Mile End Mission and Tyndale St. George's. So there are collaborations, even for those who feel that their own programming for young people is sort of on a pause. There are lots of opportunities. It's interesting to note that actually the Anglican Foundation has long connections with the Diocese of Montreal through Bishop Maguire, who dedicated his own legacy to the foundation. I would love to meet with any of you or talk with any of you who would like to discuss further what might be possible. And I know that the people at the foundation, both staff and consultant volunteers, are there just as close as a phone call or an email to give you more information. The funding deadline for this project cycle is sometime in September. The details of that will be revealed soon. Go to the foundation website to get anything you could possibly want to know about this and other projects. And there are some wonderful materials from the foundation available for if you're still sending out newsletters by post, or else you can send the links, all kinds of resources. And for anyone who does have a children's program that would like to have the trademark Care Bear, here is an example of what you would be able to get. And I just want to point out, Bishop Mary, that this one is clearly designed for you with its lovely two-toned purple scarf. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gwenda. I actually have one with a mitre and a stole on it. A mitre, yeah, the mitre and stole. But I think Care Bears are delightful. But thank you so much, and look forward to, maybe we can put the Anglican Foundation link in the chat here. They have Deacon Care Bears as well. Yes, they do. Thank you, Gwenda. Our next speaker is Canon Neil Mancor, who is going to talk to us about the Primates Project.
Thank you very much. I have just placed in the chat website link, www.spirit.anglican.ca. And this is the National Church website for the Surprised by the Spirit initiative. And we are inviting all of you to take part in this initiative. This has come from Primate Linda and our Primate Linda Nichols, and the Resources for Discipleship Network, which exists under Faith, Worship and Ministry, the Anglican Church of Canada. And it is about fostering a national conversation about what the Holy Spirit is saying to us, to the whole church, through this experience of pandemic, as we begin to look to the future. We've all had very many experiences, and many of us have been challenged, but also surprised by the Spirit, how the Spirit has led us and guided us, what new things we have learned, what new strengths we have seen. And so this is about all of us having a national conversation and to grasp the moment of what the Spirit is saying to us through this experience. We want to hear that and hold on to that and share that with one another. And the great image of Surprised by the Spirit is sparks, the firefly image, because I really think that there's been so many new learnings and new inspirations and new ideas, and we want to hold on to them and celebrate them and share them. And so a very simple reflective and prayerful process has been put together, which you can do individually or as a group. It's about reflecting on a passage of scripture, reflecting on your experience of being church during a time of pandemic. And that is there in the spirit.anglican.ca website. There's also a children's version to do with Sunday schools. And we'd like to encourage everyone to get together and see what sparks emerge from your conversations. You could do this as an individual on your own and share some of your insights, or you could do it as a whole church, or as a Bible study, or a clericus, or a parish council, a deanery, any gathering together. And we'd love it if you could share your sparks to this website. And those sparks might be in written form, it might be a story or some poetry, it might be in art. And maybe you've drawn a picture to show us. or it could be even in a little video that you produced. But share your sparks to the national website. And we're going to take all those and bring them together and celebrate them at Thanksgiving. So it's open now, and we invite you to share your sparks. And we look forward to celebrating what the Spirit has shown us through this experience. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Neil. I don't see in the chat, so maybe you didn't press return when you put the information in.
Oh, I'll try again. Oh, maybe I didn't.
There you
Ta-da,
go.
there we are.
Anglican Foundation, and there's wonderful. So they've just updated. Great. J'espère que ces deux ressources seront disponibles en français parce que nous tentons d'être inclusifs de nos gens francophones. Okay, we're now going to have prayer and a hymn. Let us pray.
Turn our hearts and minds to God in prayer. Almighty God, we come before you to give you thanks and to bring our requests before you. We particularly ask your continuing presence in this meeting of Synod, that we would be strengthened, encouraged, and filled with vision and your spirit for the mission of your church in our diocese. I now invite you to take this time to pray for this Synod in the silence of your hearts.
Une lecture du livre des Éphésiens, chapitre 4, versets 11 à 16. C'est lui qui a fait don de certains comme apôtres, d'autres comme prophètes, d'autres comme prédicateurs de l'Évangile, et d'autres encore comparables à des bergers comme enseignants. Il a fait don de ces hommes pour que les membres du peuple saint soient rendus aptes à accomplir leur service en vue de la construction du corps de Christ. Ainsi, nous parviendrons tous ensemble à l'unité dans la foi et dans la connaissance du Fils de Dieu, à l'état d'adulte, à un stade de maturité où se manifeste la plénitude qui nous vient de Christ. De cette manière, nous ne serons plus des petits-enfants ballottés comme des barques par les vagues et emportés çà et là par le vent de toutes sortes d'enseignements, à la merci d'hommes habiles à entraîner les autres dans l'erreur. Au contraire, en exprimant la vérité dans l'amour, nous grandirons à tout égard vers celui qui est la tête, Christ. C'est de lui que le corps tout entier tire sa croissance pour s'affermir dans l'amour, sa cohésion et sa forte unité, lui venant de toutes les articulations dont il est pourvu, pour assurer l'activité attribuée à chacune de ses parties. Amen.
Take my life and let it be consecrated, Lord, to Thee. Take my hands and let them move on the impulse of Thy love, at the impulse of Thy love. Take my feet and let them be swift and beautiful for Thee. Take my voice and let me sing always only for my King, always only for my King. Take and my gold. Not a mite would I withhold. Take my moments and my days, let them flow in ceaseless praise. Let them flow in ceaseless praise. Take my will and make it thine. It shall be no longer mine. Take my heart, it is thine own. It shall be thy royal throne. It shall be thy royal throne. Take my heart, it is thine own. It shall be thy royal throne.
I'm not going to dismiss you yet. That is later. We have not very many things left to do before we conclude for today. So I wonder if we can give up the 5-minute break that's in the schedule here and push on. Thank you to St. Mark's and St. Peter's for their leading the worship at what might have been the midday, but is a little past midday right now. We now have Members Forum, and I have a few names of people who signed up to speak for Members Forum. I remind you that each member has 1 minute at the microphone, and I have a timer. And the first person I'm calling is Nancy Green Gregoire.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes, we do.
Thank you. I wanted to take what we learned from Reverend Judy Paulson today and tie it to the Education for Ministry course. I wish that name was different. Ministry has a lot of, connotations, possibly a bit negative, like theology and evangelism. And maybe it should be Education for Disciples, Cultivating Disciples. And if people are interested in that course, you do learn about the apostolic calling of the church. You do tackle biblical illiteracy because we read the Bible cover to cover, and we learn to talk about spirituality. We learn to be able to articulate our own beliefs, and that helps when we want to open up to others. So I encourage anyone who wants to learn more about this course to get in touch with me. We have 3 courses. They're all online right now, and they're easy to join. Just get in touch with me. I can put it in the chat, but it's also in my report. And I encourage you to read all the reports for the work in the diocese, and I encourage you to download the latest version because there was an update to the Mile and Mission report. An earlier one was put in by mistake, so that everything you need to know about what's going on in our diocese is in those reports. Thank you.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Nancy. And pretty good. You did go over your 1 minute, but I think what you're suggesting is really important. It's education that helps us learn to talk about our faith and wrestle through get over the stones and get the seeds ready to plant, ready to plant with others as well. Thank you. Anne Cummin. I don't know under which hat you're under, Anne, but Anne Cummin has all kinds of hats in our diocese. Anne, are you there?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Good. I'm going to say to you all that I'm sure you've all heard, and you also heard it come from Gwenda, the concept of paying things forward. And in Canada, we've all had the opportunity, or we will have, of being vaccinated against COVID. But this isn't universally so. Some countries haven't received any vaccine yet, and some have difficulty because they really don't have many funds. And so PWRDF and the Anglican Church of Canada are joining together to raise money on a campaign, Pay It Forward. and to raise money that can be given to the countries that need so they can get the vaccination that they need. And I won't say much more because I'm running out of time, but information will be sent out during this coming week to congregations, telling them how they can pay it forward. And if you haven't had your vaccination yet, please think of donating anyway. Thank you.
Wonderful, Anne. Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Sophie Roland. Sophie? You're unmuted. Good. Can't hear you though, Sophie.
Try this one.
Okay, try again, Sophie.
Oh, she didn't ask to speak. Sophie Roland didn't ask to speak.
Okay, so sorry, you're on the list. Well, we've saved a minute in our time. Let's see.
Chris Berger has put his hand up.
Chris Berger has your hand up. Please speak, Chris. You're muted.
Sorry, that was an accidental hand up.
Well, you just want to know we're really paying attention to you. We are. Okay. I'm going to tell you the election results. How about that? Elected to Diocesan Council for this year: Nancy Green Gregoire, Danica Meredith, Susan Wynn, Nicholas Fort, Grace Burson, Tanya Lasac. And the next meeting and the first meeting of this year's Diocesan Council is June 8th at 4 p.m. and it's online. Okay. And General Synod delegates elected for General Synod, which is next summer, not this summer. Victor David Ngwibi Pungu, Jesse Zink. The alternate clergy are Amy Hamilton and Tyson Rosberg. The lay delegates to General Synod are Dion Lewis and Susan Wynn, and the alternates are Randy Gates and Nancy Green Gregoire. Our next Diocesan Synod is June 18th, 2022. It's a one-day synod. We'll be starting a new theme, will we?
Yes.
It will be a new theme, which will be revealed in the fullness of time. Pardon? I'm sorry, Dion. It's on anti-racism. I guess I was doing something else. I'm going to say thank you to all the people who've contributed to putting this synod together, and to reflect that I'm feeling very privileged to be part of a synod that is working at and wrestling with the whole business of how we continue to become and grow as authentic Christians who love what they do so much and love the one they worship so much, that it's worth finding ways to love the people he loves and care for them and reach out to them and tell them about our avenues of hope and restoration. I somehow seem to be separated from my thank you list, but Robert's got another one. I want to thank the Synod office staff, and especially those who came today and are here in the empty Fulford Hall helping us put on this synod. I want to thank our guest speaker, the Reverend Canon Dr. Judy Paulson. I think you will have found her very inspiring, and a reminder that on our diocesan YouTube channel, you can find the talks that Judy gave and her interview with Neil, and in fact, all this exciting stuff too. Thank you to our workshop facilitators, Grace Burson, Mark Gibson, Glenn Smith, Diana Keener, June Lashley, Leanne Matthews, Marnie Matoga, Thomas Ntivala Amunda, Jean-Daniel O'Donoghue, Andrew Rennie, Dominic Russo, Graham Singh, and the Synod Planning Committee, Chris Barriger, Victor David Mbuibi Pungu, Dion Lewis, Neil Mancor, and Archdeacon Robert Camara. I want to thank the archdeacons, but especially begin by thanking my Vicar General for his tireless work for all of us as a diocese, and his passion and gifts and dedication and discipline, all of which serve all of us so handsomely. Thank you to the territorial archdeacons, and especially want to thank Archdeacon Michelle Eason, who has announced her intention to retire on the last Sunday in the church year, the Reign of Christ. And that, of course, will be part of my report next year as well. Thank you to the Chancellor, who had to give up some golf to come and be with us today. Appreciate you being with us, David. And I think we get
one extra thing. Apparently Sophie Roland did ask to speak. If you would allow her to speak, she's going to be speaking on Bill C-15.
Okay, I am going to give Sophie 1 minute on C-15. Sophie Roland.
Hi, it's Pam Dillon in the Eastern Townships. I'm not Sophie Rolla. Here I am, and maybe this is the best for last. Every Sunday, as members of the Anglican Church, we do an Indigenous land acknowledgement. Can anybody hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
Good. I'll carry on. Every Sunday, there's an Indigenous land acknowledgement. And following forward with that, we may ask ourselves, well, what does that mean and how does that affect me? I want to bring to the attention of the House today to mention that Bill C-15 is before the House of Commons in Ottawa, soon to be passing through the Senate. This is the bill which validates the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. On May 4th, our Truth and Reconciliation commissioners gathered together. We were over 2,000 people on a Zoom call. The webpage was Faith in the Declaration, and that evening was hosted by the Mennonite Central Committee. I encourage each and every one of you to take a look at that UNDRIP, bit like a leaky faucet, United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. Bill C-15, every Sunday we do a land acknowledgement. This is an opportunity for us to put our faith in action and help build the bridges between our Indigenous communities and the people of Canada. And thank you
so much, Pamela. And just slightly over our minute, and I really appreciate you bringing that up. There is so much to think about. Sophie doesn't have a microphone, so there you go.
So we discovered that somebody must have shared with Pam the email address. So Pam is listed as Sophie Roland, and in fact, so when her request to speak on Bill C-15
okay,
it came in under Sophie's name, not Pam's name. Hence the reason why you get an email. If you don't get an email from us, you should let us know, because we thought all along that Pam wasn't here, but in fact Pam was here under a different name.
Right, so that's where the unique registration works, that every single person, so sharing the link for today with somebody else meant that it looked like two of you were on, when really only one of you and another person who hadn't used their own link. So there you go. We just hope we don't have to do this every year for the next 5 years, but it's possible that we will continue in some measure with a bimodal synod. I don't know how we're going to do this. What we do want to do is meet together, and I appreciate all of you giving us your time for this synod. And I bet you're glad you don't have to drive home, because you're already home, except for us. So let's end with prayer. The Lord be with you.
Also with you.
May the God of peace, who brought again from the dead our Lord Jesus Christ, that great shepherd of the sheep, By the blood of the eternal covenant, equip us with everything good, that we may do his will, working in us that which is well-pleasing in his sight. And the blessing of God Almighty, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit rest upon you and remain with you always. Amen. I'd like a motion for us to adjourn Synod. Dion Lewis, first off the dock. Thank you. Grace and peace to you all. Goodbye.